What's good, people? Welcome back to Pros Only Sports and welcome back to another episode of United State of Mind. This time, we're going to be talking about the Glazers. Why have they decided to sell right now? I mean, look, there's a lot to discuss on this topic. It's been drawn out for so long since their ownership started 15, 16 years ago. It will be in May. And I wanted to really just break down some points from my perspective and give you my opinions on why they decided to sell right now. But before we do anything, people, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if you're new, hit that notification bell, follow the socials down below, and let's get into it. So obviously, the Glazers indicated that they wanted to sell Manchester United to the highest bidder. I want to say the back end of last year. Someone correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, please. But they indicated that they wanted to sell the club by the end of Q1 of this year, and so they've got 2 months to sell it. We've literally just started February, so they've literally got 2 months to sell it within. Am I optimistic it will happen? I'm not too sure. We don't know how far they are down in the process in terms of who's got the bid that is now locked in and they're now negotiating the terms of that deal. But there's obviously so much to go through, and obviously it's going to take some time. So we'll see how it all gets how it all gets resolved. To be honest. But I think I want to take everyone back to the start of the season. I'm not sure if anybody noticed it, but I did. In the first home game against Brighton at the start of the season, the entire family of the Glazers actually went to Old Trafford, or more or less the entire family. Now, that's very interesting when I looked at it, because I was just kind of like, they've, for the most part, apart from Joel and Avram, and maybe a couple others, the rest of the family have stayed far and away from Manchester United, maybe because they're not interested in it at all, or maybe because they were maybe scared of showing their face and people recognizing who they were, because they see a lot of the kind of vim from supporters in terms of their hatred for the family and what they've done to the club. So it was kind of surprising to see all of them there. But for me, it kind of indicated that, okay, something is happening behind the scenes, because for all of them to just arrive at Old Trafford on the opening game of the season, no matter if it is the debut game for Eric Ten Hag, I don't think a lot of the family even care, because some of them weren't even involved in the decision making. The fact that they all arrived at OT and were there kind of just behind the scenes, like, just like in the stands and stuff like that, watching the game, it just kind of made me feel like something else is going on behind the scenes. And then obviously, as time moves moving on, a lot of rumors are coming out to say, the Glazers are looking to sell. They may be looking to relinquish some shares of the club so that they, have a little bit less of a controlling stake and give it to somebody, to another group or another individual or whoever. And it just started to put together some of the rumors that we kind of were all looking for and hoping for, in terms of the club being sold. Now, moving on to my next point, like, there has been continuous process, and I'm not even talking about in the recent time. There's been process from the beginning of it all. From the beginning of it all, a lot of well-informed fans knew exactly what kind of situation we were going to be walking into when the Glazers decided to come in and buy the club outright. And if I was young at that point, it was 2005 when they joined the club. I was 13 years old, like, so I wasn't really too clued up at 12, 13 years old in terms of what that meant for Manchester United. The club was still winning. We still had the best manager in the world. We had some really good players in our team. So at that point, I didn't really knew nor cared at the time. And from that point, there was protests. Like, I remember them burning effigies of Martin Glazer. I remember, Malcolm Glazer. I remember, there was a protest, literally, all United fans that went to the FA Cup final in 2005 when we played Arsenal and unfortunately lost on penalty shootout. In the penalty shootout, the supporters wore black on that day, kind of matching what the kit that the team was wearing on the day. Maybe a coincidence, maybe not, but they all wore black that day to kind of solidify, like, it's the funeral for Manchester United, because once this takeover happens, we're doomed. Then obviously there was the breakaway, FC United of Manchester, breaking away from Manchester United, as that these were former supporters of Manchester United who, in like a total way of protesting to disassociate themselves with the club in all aspects, and decided to form their own club and start at the bottom of the period and try and work their way up to wherever they feel like they can in due time. So, from that point all the way up until now, where, there's been a lot, social media is introducing, because of social media now, anybody can have a voice wherever in the world. if you have access to internet and a phone or a computer or something, you can get involved in the conversation, you can get involved in the chat. And people protesting with the hashtags and the imagery, the videos, and all of this type of stuff. And then obviously at Old Trafford as well, the presence has gotten louder and louder over the last few months. I mean, it's been ongoing for a long time, and so that could also play a part in why the owners would have decided, what, we're universally not liked. It's been like that before. We know this, but maybe we've had enough of it. The Chelsea sale is also another interesting factor. Obviously, what happened with Chelsea with Roman Abramovich and his kind of involvement in Chelsea, his involvement in the higher echelons of Russian politics, and the conflict with Ukraine, which kind of was a domino effect that kind of ran down into his ownership in Chelsea. And the fact that Chelsea was sold for £3.5 billion, which I feel like maybe it's a little bit undervalued to the value of what Chelsea is as a club. Maybe a little bit undervalued, not too much, but a little bit undervalued. That may have pushed the Glazers into triggering a sale of the club, because they felt, maybe they felt on their end that, look, you look at Chelsea at that point, they are a pretty wealthy club, bankrolled by a billionaire. If he can be forced out by the UK government, essentially, what chance do we stand, type of thing. And maybe that sale maybe pushed them to start putting together proceedings to ready themselves, and looking at the value, they could say, oh, we could really top that. And for them, they'll kind of say, we've gone out on our high horse. We've gone out with the top dog of English football, and we sold it for this amount of money, and we're going to pocket all of this money. And maybe that's what they're looking at as well in terms of that final sale price for Chelsea. And so they had to do the same and push themselves out there and see if they can get a bigger bid and a bigger final purchase in terms of that figure, which I believe is going to be valued around 5 or 6 billion. So they're going to potentially more or less double, what Chelsea was sold for. But then also, it kind of brings me to the point that the value of the club is decreasing. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the overall value, because there's a lot of potential in Manchester United, of course. But what I'm talking about is, from the fact that, I remember back in the day when I was a lot younger, Manchester United would get a new shirt manufacturer. So we moved from, I'm wearing an Umbro shirt right now. I don't know if people can see that. Yeah, I'm wearing an Umbro shirt right now. Back in the day, we were sponsored by Umbro. And then in, I believe, 2002 or I think it's 2002, before 2003, we signed a manufacturing deal with Nike. And that at the time was the biggest kit manufacturing deal for any sports team in the world ever. I don't remember the figure, unfortunately, but I remember that being big news at the time. And I think over the years, as the club has declined, like from a on the pitch perspective, we've seen all these other clubs surpass us in terms of these kit manufacturing deals. So I'll give you an example. Man City, when they signed, I think, a deal with first Puma and then with Nike, were surpassing the figures that United had for their deal with Nike. For example, Liverpool signing that deal that they signed with Nike, Arsenal signing the deal that they signed with Puma, Real Madrid renewing their contract with Adidas, was just all out fast and surpassing and eclipsing United's deal, even with Adidas, that they had at the time, which was at the time, I believe, close to being a world record deal and whatnot. And that's just one aspect of the dwindling kind of reputation United had from the business world. And then I'm looking at the shirt sponsors as well. The shirt sponsors, we used to always have the big record deals, that these shirt sponsors, these companies would pay United over a course of a certain period of time to have their name printed on the shirts. And even that has dwindled over the years, where we're fighting for our lives and scrambling around for a new shirt sponsor to try and put ourselves in that conversation where, other clubs have come through and they've got these big deals with the Fly Emirates and all of this and that. I think, that's dwindling as well. And you can kind of see that in terms of the value. I feel like, obviously, especially with the Adidas manufacturing deal, we get penalized every year that we're not in the Champions League. They penalize us for the contract, and that kind of has a knock-on effect across the whole operation. And with us not being in the Europa League, being in the Europa League more than the Champions League since we signed this deal, we've been penalized a lot, and those penalties are hard because they'll hit the balance sheet very hard, and it means that ultimately you're going to have to make certain cuts and provisions here and there. And you see that with obviously the playing stuff being the largest amount of expenditure out of a club every season, the players really get hit hard. We saw that that reflected in certain players having to take pay cuts coming into this season because we were back in the Europa League and stuff like that. So it's also a very interesting thing from that perspective in terms of the dwindling value of the club. And because of the dwindling value, they can't actually pull out the amount of money that they used or have been used to been receiving in dividends over the years. I have an interesting point as well. Like, could Ten Hag have been a factor? Like, I feel like for him, of course, he might not have too much influence at board level, but I feel like with him being so direct and being very assured about what he wants for the football club, and I mean football club as opposed to just Manchester United, right? Maybe he had a part to play in, them kind of triggering or changing mindset. And so maybe they felt they didn't have the heart to kind of take the team back to the top where Ten Hag wants it, right? And sometimes that could have a knock-on effect where, and it goes in the opposite direction. So instead of it coming from the top down, it's come from the ground up. So on the pitch is where we're at base level on the pitch. The fact that he has certain standards and has a way of doing things means that everybody above him needs to be aligned in that way in order for everyone to perform on the pitch, where that's where you're going to get the majority of your revenue right there from the playing staff, the coaches and all of that. They put everything together properly. The revenues fall off the back of that. That's how Manchester United was built as a global brand. The football on the pitch is what built everything around it. And maybe he had a part to play in terms of how assured he was. Maybe when he was speaking to them in interviews, especially to the board, and obviously a couple of the family are members of the board, he was speaking in such a way that meant, that maybe triggered something in their mind to say, you know what, I don't think we can match what he's looking for in terms of an expectation. And they may have decided, to go back to their family and say, we need to sell because we can't keep up with what he's demanding, essentially. So maybe Ten Hag could have been a factor. I don't know. Maybe it's something to explore, and maybe it'd be something that we could see a lot more in a lot more detail when the sale eventually happens. Potentially, we don't know actually. Because when I say that, I'm looking at there's a less commercial focus at United than there has been over the last few years, and I think it comes from the manager. Since he came in, he decided to put football first. And in keeping with our traditions, young players and all these type of things, like, yeah, we brought in some big players and yeah, we spent a lot of money, but we've always been that kind of club. We've always been a very self-sufficient club. Before we had the ownership from the Glazers, we were self-sufficient. We spent the money that we made off our revenues. Now, I'm going to just kind of go and just kind of put in a bit of a closing argument here in regards to, there's been a lot of chatter about who should come in and join the club. Me personally, I don't care. I feel like the person that comes and owns the club needs to just care about what they're doing. So if they come in and they've got a history of this, that, and the other, I don't think people understand. If you're a billionaire, your hands are dirty. Like, there's no clean billionaires out here. They all have done something somewhere, exploited somebody somewhere to gain the wealth that they've been able to gain. So there's no clean billionaire. So the fact that people are clamoring for Ratcliffe and other people are shunning the kind of Arab world for the ownership, it doesn't really matter. On either end, there's going to be some sort of backhanded story or something that, they're using Manchester United to try and clean up their image a little bit more. So I don't really care necessarily about who owns the club as long as they're coming in with the right intentions. So, all in all, I feel like, as long as somebody comes in with the right intentions and they have the kind of money that we're looking for to kind of, repair the damage, because essentially, somebody coming in, they're going to have to be very benevolent in a certain way, because they have to clear that 600 million debt. They have a stadium that they're going to need to either revamp or relocate and invest in for that. And obviously, they're not investing in themselves. They're going to have some businesses that are going to come in and fund that on behalf of them. Playing staff has to continually, be competitive, so you have to invest in that. Facilities have to be invested in. Carrington and building a women's stadium, building a permanent stadium for for the academy and stuff like that. So it's all very interesting in terms of where we feel, but I feel like these are some of the reasons that I have put down our opinions and some factual points that I feel have kind of led to the Glazers deciding to sell right now. Whether it's going to happen in the time period that they say, I'm not so sure. maybe in the next few weeks we'll start to see the steam kind of picking up in terms of us seeing a final sale actually being done, ratified by the league and actually happening and coming into play, so that we can go into next season with new ownership, new direction, and hopefully some success in the future. But yeah, look, I mean, those are my thoughts, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Why do you think the Glazers have sold right, or are looking to sell right now? And I'll be looking forward to hearing your comments and thoughts on that. And once again, people, thank you for all the support. I do appreciate it very, very much. Make sure you're hitting that like button as well. Make sure you're hitting the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, follow the socials down below and all that. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.